welcome. Thank you so much, first of all, for taking time out of your day to join me for this feedback session. So, what I'm going to do is kind of talk about a process that I've developed, added to, adjusted over the years. It's worked for me in some many cases. It's also been adjusted as we constantly do with what we do. So I'm going to talk through this process, and then we should hopefully have some time to chat about, some of your ideas, the things that you do, so that we can share some other brilliance in terms of getting students to actually create effective peer feedback, so that they can improve their writing, but not just improve their writing, but feel confident in doing it. So I currently teach at Blair High School, but I didn't really start to develop this process in this way until I started teaching theater. I'm an English teacher by trade, but I really noticed when I had my kids in theater critiquing scenes, I noticed that we really need to work on how we deliver those messages. I've also noticed over the years, I'm sure you've noticed this too, is that students just don't naturally give helpful feedback. They also are very anxious, a lot of them very, very anxious about sharing their work. Um, and, I also then learned they need to explicitly be taught, how to deliver this feedback, not just the kind of feedback we're trying to look for. So that's kind of how my process is going to focus. And we all have students of varying levels, especially in like the same room often. I've taught on level, I've taught honors, and I've taught all honors. So, I've dealt with quite a mix of students who have different experiences, skills, and interests, which also adds to the mix. So, I would say hopefully this is a process. I'm going to go through and really break down the longer process. So, I'm hoping that you find some maybe breadcrumbs. Maybe you think this major process might work. Maybe you just want to scale it down to your students and your needs. So, just kind of think about that as we're walking through this. And for those of you who just came in, let me just real quick share once again the slides in case you would like to follow along with us, and click on some links if you feel like you want to explore on your own. I'm totally cool with that. So here's my process. Um, so I really noticed that I was kind of separating back in, I don't know, when I was trying to figure all this out. I was really separating portions of the writing process and not doing things simultaneously, especially when it came to feedback. So when I started teaching feedback from the front loading it, I felt like there was a lot more happening. So my process before writing, we tend to explore the prompt, choose the topic, and then we're going to go ahead and do some training before we then enter into peer feedback. This is just a quick overall overview of my feedback process. I'm going to dig into each of these. So if it feels like I'm speeding through this, don't worry, we're going to break it down. But essentially, before we discuss feedback, I want to make sure that my students know the prompt. They've maybe outlined it, or maybe they've just chosen a topic. They've maybe actually have all their evidence. But then I tried to make it a little fun for me and the students by establishing a real world context, because it really helps them, especially in English. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was in high school English, I didn't really see the connection to how I was going to use this in my future. So I really try to make sure to give some options there. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, then we have a whole training session with the kids. And then they go into helping each other out. So let's talk about this. Yeah, so I already told you before this training session that I'm going to walk you through, students have hopefully explored the prompt. I also like to change things up, move the chairs around. If I can get them like literally feeling like they're in an orientation or training session, if I have room in my classroom, I will, because I just want them to feel like, it's not, we're not doing normal things here, we're doing important things. You need to focus, and it's feeling a little not like school. So let's talk about feedback and training my students. I like to try and make things a little fun, because even I can get a little bit bored with this stuff. So I try to make sure that we kind of take on some roles. When I do feedback for maybe a week or two, I'll say, look, you're no longer students in my classroom. You are now blah. And if you look on the right hand side of the screen, I've come up with 4 random scenarios. It might depend on my group or their energy or what I think they might get into. So for example, I might tell them, you're now hired as a writing coach for the University of Maryland's Writing Center. Hello, you get $15 an hour, but you need to go through this training session. Or, hey, your TikTok account has blown up and now you want to start getting serious and writing a newsletter on Substack, but you need to learn how to write and you need to learn how to get your editors to write. So that's like the thing. And then you can have fun with this. You can have them, okay, so what was your TikTok looking like? Or, I'm going to go through the scenario as if they are teachers. So I would have my students pull out a real quick name tag. They can, put their name in there, and we would start addressing each other as we do as colleagues. But honestly, what I found when I do this is students are just a little more comfortable engaging in class when they're in role, when they're not really themselves, they are this other person. And it also then gives them a connection to from English class to any other realm of their life, hopefully. And then they realize the value of why we're doing this. And so this is called process drama in theater, in drama education. There's a lot of books on it. If you want to read more, I put a link down there. Anyway, so I like to try and make it fun. We're going to go through this scenario as if I'm telling my students that they are ninth grade teachers. So I would set the scene for them. I'd put the chairs up in the front of the room, kind of like this, and I'd say, "All right, you are ninth grade teachers." Oh, hello. Sorry, I'm going to mute you. There we go. Welcome.
Hi.
Hey, so
Hi. It's for some reason my camera's not working. Sorry, that's what I was late trying to figure out how to get it to work.
I know you're here.
Okay.
I'll send when I get a moment. I'll send the slides to the chat box. Thanks. Awesome. So So all right, we're with the kids. We're setting up this training session. And I tell them, all right, you are now ninth grade teachers. We're going to go through a norming process. So it's almost an opportunity, if you do this role, to teach them what we do. And they maybe understand the value of what we're doing for them. And maybe they realize how hard we work. I don't know. Anyway, so I might take them through this so they get the seriousness of this scenario. And then I tell them, when teachers norm, they go through the criteria, they discuss it, and then they talk about, well, what's working well, what are our students generally doing effectively, so I'll take them through this process, we'll ask these questions, and then finally, we'll go ahead and do the feedback. Sorry, I've got chat boxes in my way, I need to organize myself. All right, here. So I'm going to take you through this, and I actually have all of this written out in a worksheet. So if you are interested in this process or stealing parts of it, I have it written out. You'll see in a moment. And I've written it in directions for students so that you don't have to rewrite things if you want to use it. Anyway, so we get on the same page. We're in this training session. They're now teachers, they're professionals. So here's the worksheet I was referencing. So if you are on the slideshow right now, you can click most pictures here and it links you to the things I've made for you. So this is the overall process that you can take in chunks or whatever. We just set the scene. So now students are going to do an individual warm up. They got to look at that rubric. So this is an opportunity to look at the rubric. You can also have your students, and I linked this here for you. This is a rubric that you may use. But I really want to point out that another thing that has helped our students this year, my team, I did not develop this, but my colleague did with our kids. Instead of calling a score of 5 a score of 5, because what does that mean to our students? And then instead of calling it an A, because I don't know, some kids have feelings about A's and B's and C's, we developed just a quick little 5 means this is your expertise, right? 4 means you are confident. This is good. 3 means we have room for growth. So these are all positive ways of saying, instead of you're advanced or proficient, I think students react to these phrases more. So anyway, let's go back though. I'm sorry if I'm going quickly. We'll have some time for questions. This is also a great place. So this might just be their warm up. Since I work with students of all levels in my classes, especially when I was doing these sessions more so, I really tried to make sure that I had some helpful hints. The rubric says well argued reasoning or well chosen reasoning, well crafted reasoning. But I don't know, some of our kids need a reminder of well, what types of reasoning are out there. So you might want to provide them, it's nice to provide them with just some of those helpful examples. Going back to our slideshow though, this might also be a great place to look at scored student exemplars. So I have a slideshow with just some, I don't know, resources for you. I know that I've never taught AP English, but I know that they have a wealth of scored examples. So I linked that for you here. And it's just nice and easy to pull out. Maybe if you're not even teaching AP, maybe it's still modeled towards that. When I did a lot of style analyses with my students, I would come up with a sample paragraph, and then we would look at it in terms of a 5, a 4, a 3. With my students who needed a little more support in terms of crafting paragraphs, I would have them like color code some of these things, like here's your thesis claim, highlight the evidence, highlight the analysis. So you can really break this down. But if your students don't need that, then you can just show them and have them go through these. So that's always helpful. But again, I've also done it where I don't look at the scored exemplars. It's interesting to see what they pick up on the rubric themselves. All right, so we just went through that warm up, and then they're going to go ahead and talk about this, and then they're going to actually look at some paragraphs and start applying their criteria. So I have this worksheet for them. In this case, my students were writing a research paper. They could pick any topic they wanted, and it was an informational research essay. So they then go to this worksheet. You're leaving feedback. Annotate by leaving at least 3 comments. What's working well? What do we notice this writing needs? So kids will mark this all up, and then we share again, what did we do? Here's the link to my document. So they do it on their own for some practice. And then we look at their examples. We look at some of their, I also, if you want, you can provide examples of how you give feedback, right? That might be helpful for students who have just never done this before. They're not very confident. Again, scaled up, but that can be torn down as much as you need. So when I have them practice individually after this training session, you're now a teacher, you've done this on your own, as we do in a norming session, look at something on your own, and now let's talk about what we're seeing, right? We come together. So then I have my students come together, share their things on that, and then they become a PLC, and they walk around the room and kind of like a gallery walk. They look at a few different intro paragraphs. And then they comment as a team about what they're seeing, what's working, what's not. Now, if you have students who need a little more help with the writing process, because I really use these feedback sessions to also teach the writing process. We break down and look at intro paragraphs. We look at what is crafting a really solid body paragraph. So again, weaving all of these together just really, really helped. So yeah, they do that together in a group. There's a whole worksheet here, and this is once again linked to that major document I created for you. If you just kind of scroll through it, it takes you through these steps, and it's linked to other worksheets, or if you wanted to use some of these example things, it is all there for you. So I'm going a little quickly. Are there any questions so far before I kind of move into the next process? I could also save some questions for the end. All right, let's go ahead. So I'm saying if you want to break it down for students who really need help, you might just want to do intro paragraphs here so that we solely focus on the intro, and then their homework that night, hey, now write your intro paragraph. You were a teacher, you are now an expert. So now you're going to go home and write your paragraph. So that was so helpful, especially for my students who were very new to writing research essays. It really breaking it down like that helped. All right. So the next day or the next whenever, depending on how time flows in your classroom, then I have them move to body paragraphs, right? So I really had to break it down with this group. It was intro paragraphs and then one body, and now we're looking at other body paragraphs. And this was kind of cool because I only gave them 3 paragraphs. So if you think about 3 paragraphs divided by 30 kids, so there are about 10 kids on each document. So there are a lot of people leaving feedback. So what happened was, kind of ended up looking like this. You can see, all of the things kind of popping in, and you can see the variety in what students are leaving. At this point, I have not talked to my kids about what is really helpful feedback and what is maybe not so helpful feedback. You could at this point, if you want to, because you want to kind of save time there. But after I have them, tear up these 3 body paragraphs. And honestly, I tend to purposely put not so great body paragraphs. Like they have the structure I want, but they're not so great because I want my kids to feel confident when they are norming. So if I start with some pretty easy, like, oh, I can do this. Yeah. Like, wow, I'm a teacher. Look at me. And they start to build that confidence, and then you can kind of level up. So these body paragraphs, they're not like the strongest, but you can clearly see that, students have a lot to say about them. So then after that, I really like to break down and talk about feedback and why we tend to sometimes give like we meet we have our best intentions, but we may not give like it in the best way, right? And I see this all the time with students. So you might want to have a lesson like this where, we talk about how language is everything. I'll have them talk about a time when someone tried to give them feedback, but it wasn't very helpful or motivating. Um, and students will always have stories about, even if it wasn't in a classroom, someone talking about their outfit. I mean, they experience this all the time. So I have them go back to these body paragraphs that we all tore up. Trying to go backwards in my slideshow. Yeah. So I have them go back to these. And then I have them look at our feedback and they do this worksheet here. So sorry, I just went through like 3 slides, but this is the directions for feedback on our feedback. And here's the worksheet that they're going to do. So as they look at those body paragraphs, they enter this worksheet. We have, it's not linked, but it's in our folder. But basically it's a column. One column, helpful feedback, one column, feedback needs improvement. And students paste the feedback, and then below in bold, they write what is helpful about it or what is not helpful about it. So we really break down, we really start to see, and it's interesting, the things that students leave, or it's actually funny, like there's kind of unhelpful feedback in the unhelpful feedback, like this is not helpful in the slightest. So then I might break down that language, like, okay, can we say this in a different way? Again, this is depending on your time, your classroom, your students. If you're like, this is going to take a long time, then you can just skip this and give them this list and just go over it as a warm up, right? So let's talk about helpful feedback. It's specific, it's collaborative, it's positive, encouraging, it's inquisitive, it's engaged, right? So I have a document for you that contains all that. Yeah. Okay. So our students have normed. Our students have built their confidence. They're like, okay, I can do this. I can give someone feedback, and I think I'm pretty good at it. At this point, I might stop and have them then write their own body paragraph because we really want to make sure we're drafting our pieces, especially with the things that we saw right there. I love to do a Pomodoro. I don't know if you all have had like, I don't know, I guess trouble with getting students to really write for like a solid amount of time. So I've been using the Pomodoro technique. It's basically you set a 25-minute timer. They have to write for that time. It's sacred. Like you focus, and in the next 5 minutes they take a break. And I've done that in segments with my students this year. They really liked it. It really got them to focus. So then, the writing. Okay, now we're ready to actually do peer feedback. So I have a whole different worksheet for this. It's in the folder, but essentially I give students 2 group members because you never know who might not show up. You never know who didn't do the writing. So if you give them 2, at least they have hopefully 1 person. But essentially I like to give them options. So if they want to leave written feedback, there's some stipulations about what I want, but they could also record some Screencastify feedback. Sometimes it's kind of cool to just talk it out. Some students express themselves a lot more when they can just speak it. So I give them directions for Screencastify. And my students, especially over Zoom, I was using Screencastify a lot. So I give them examples that I've actually done. So I have examples there, and you can use and try it out. I'm sure some of you have. So then my students will leave feedback on the document, their draft, and then they have to go and fill out the rubric for them in addition to those comments. So they will go to this form. It asks questions like basically based off of the rubric. And then at the end, I model here, a nice example of how I want you to leave a nice little ending comment. And then they do. So it's a longer process, but I like it because I'll tell you why I want it to take up this much time in a moment. So a really quick helpful tip. Oh, and I also try to again break down the rubric, give them some look fors, that we've talked about in our writing. We've talked about, body paragraphs look like this. And then also I might give them even more questions for their rubric. These are probably things we already talked about like a couple of days ago when we went over the rubric, but things drop out of their mind. So this is a helpful reminder. So yeah, I just try to break down the rubric in many ways if they need. All right, going back. So, all right, students have a partner, they are going through the process. So, what am I doing during this time? And how do I make sure that they are really using this effectively? So, Um, oh yeah, one thing about that form, to make sure that you cut out any pain in your life, when you go to settings, just make sure you have it send responders a copy of their receipt, and then you put it on the student to forward the email to their partner. If if you can, that might just help. You could, I guess, give them access to the spreadsheet, but I know it could be interesting to see what feedback other people are leaving. But again, that can get a little, students might not want other people to see that. All right, I will be done in a moment and we will have time for questions. So while my students are going through this kind of longer feedback process, I have taught ninth grade English. That writing semester is kind of the bulk of the curriculum. So at the beginning of the year, I really made a point to go through this process in a long way and then do one-on-one conferences with my students, because it helped to reinforce everything we just did. And it also helped me to strengthen my relationships with each student, really get to know them. I mean, when you're in front of them, you can really see where their anxieties are. You can kind of, in terms of their writing, you can see where they kind of hesitate. And it's so nice when you give them like a compliment, in person, like, wow, this is, look at you doing this. They're like, they get to sit up. So it's been really fun. But I do my conferences maybe a little differently. Some people might do it this way, but to be honest, like I don't I've tried to prioritize not grading at home in my life. It's been a huge, it's never always accomplished, but this has helped me. So, what I'll do with my students is a think aloud conference. And it does take a lot longer than your average conferencing sessions, but I'm fine with it because I feel like it really helps save me a lot of time in the end and time at home. So what I will tell my kids is just kind of like a script. I said, we're going to do a think aloud conference session. So you or I will read your writing out loud. We're going to do it in this little corner. We can do it outside, with the door open. It's no big deal. And at any point, you or me needs to say pause, and we need to then say what we're thinking or wondering or noticing. Okay. This is a conversation about your writing, so we can set some goals, and we really want to find like your voice, right? And then they obviously, a lot of them will cringe after I say that because, like, oh my God, we're going to read my writing out loud. So then I say, like, look, no one likes to hear their work read out loud, but remember, it's a draft. And I can't tell you how much time and pain it's going to save you when you're editing later and when you get to like your partner, you know what I mean? So, you really build them up. You're going to hear the grammatical errors. But then I try to end it with like, but you're also going to hear where you sound really good. And that's when you're going to know you want to keep doing that thing. Oh, whoops. Hold on. Oof. Sorry. I forgot there's like more Screencastify videos here.
It's okay there,
Shush.
Chakram.
Shush. All right. So, anyway, let's say there's students who didn't come with writing or whatever, they're not ready for the process, or maybe they just have a lot of anxiety about the fact that you want to have their writing read out loud, like maybe somewhat near people. You could always do the Screencastify and record your conferences that way. That's how I did a lot of mine, for those students. Okay. So, so anyway, so I'll spend time doing that. Just some things to anticipate. Again, kids with no writing ready happens all the time. I just give them other time. Maybe I'll take out one of their peer edits. Students who might need more time, grouping in threes helps with that. And then also, whenever I did this, we all tend to go, ugh, did this work? Did they get it? But I think just honestly, one of the best freeing things for me was just to like look at this process as like, these kids will not have the same outcomes, and I'm okay with that. Like some kids just benefit from knowing that like wow, I'm a great writer and I'm really good at like telling other people. Or maybe some kids, a lot of what I've seen in this process is kids look at other kids writing and they will then be like, I need to level up. And they do, they're motivated to, they're not like torn down by it. Okay, so I'm so sorry I talk a lot and I talk fast and I kind of went through that quickly. I'll send the resources again, but do you all have any, I don't know, so are there other strategies that you use, or are there any, I guess, questions in terms of all of this? Yes, and I see in the chat, I think reading fluency is something we need to be doing, like, and I wish it was more explicitly written into the secondary curriculum because and I think it helps with that.
Something that I just came across. Is it okay if I speak rather than putting on the chat?
Please.
Yeah. So something that I just came across that I haven't used, it's have another student read to the author what they wrote, and so they can hear where the punctuation doesn't quite fit, where you need to pause to get an idea. So I just came across that. I'm definitely going to use it. But this is great. Thank you.
I love that. And actually, so I do try to encourage students when they're with their team. I say, I really want you to read your writing out, their writing out loud to them. We just talk about the cringe. We talk about how it's going to feel painful, but then we talk about how the pain is worth it. Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts or things you want to share that you've done that have really been awesome? I can put some of these questions back up if we need, but
I had put it in the chat, but I'll go ahead and say it out loud. I thought that the student enroll piece was fantastic. It really does help with buy-in when you're in that like teaching phase and just that instruction because as English teachers and theater teachers we're pretty lucky. A lot of what we do is not as direct instruction-y as like content heavy classes, but when we do have to like sit down and teach a concept, this can really elevate that experience for them, especially these 4 examples that you just pulled up. That's perfect, thank you. Letting them choose which one adds to that buy-in level. I love that idea, thank you.
no, thank you. I do it to make sure that I have fun in the classroom, and it ends up being kind of cool. And it's also, I mean, if it is, there is Dorothy Heathcote is the proponent or first writer of process drama. So she has a famous text, and I forget what it is, but if you look up Dorothy Heathcote and just process drama, there are practitioners who do this in the English classroom in many, many, many ways. It's
Yeah,
really
I saw that you are a mate as well. I was nominated for the Winifred Ward Scholarship, so that was one of the things that I did when I was working with Rosalind or Dr. Flynn. So, yay, theater English people! This is fantastic. Bring it alive.
Thanks. Yes, mates. Yeah, Rosalind's awesome. So yeah, if anybody wants to look into another amazing practitioner of this, Rosalind Flynn. She has a website with adding drama into especially teaching secondary English. It's awesome. Yeah, we've got 3 more minutes. Hey, you are more than welcome if you would like to take your 3 minutes to yourself before your next session. But if you want to stay for questions, I'm here or thoughts. Oh, and then I forgot, we do have a participant survey. So if you don't mind, whoops, if I could just send that to the link real fast. Sorry, one moment. It'll take a minute, but I'm sure they'll email it to, where are my links? I can't place. Here we go. Participant survey. I'm usually not this organized. I'm really impressed with myself this morning. Okay, cool. So thank you. If you could fill out the participant survey for a moment, that'd be awesome. It's always great to improve the process. So thank you for coming, and hopefully I'll see you all soon. Feel free to email me, Sarah Foreman, if you need anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So looks like we've got more people. Yeah, sorry about the wait. The crossover between these sessions has been a little unpredictable since there's like not a pass period. So anyway, let me go ahead, share my screen and kind of start to get started. I'm sure some people will be rolling through, so excuse my technology mess if it comes. All right. Good morning. So thank you so much for taking time to come here from your busy schedule and like your telework day. I appreciate you being here, but let's talk about peer feedback. I teach at Blair High School, but I was at Wheaton High School for 10 years teaching all levels of English, especially ninth grade English, which I went through on level ninth grade. I went to honors ninth grade, and then we had all honors ninth grade. So I had a lot of experience with varying levels and a lot of like, not so, I don't know, just frustrating experiences with teaching feedback because I felt like I didn't find my process that worked for everybody. But it wasn't until I started teaching theater where I really started rethinking my process in English. And so I kind of came up with this. So what I'm going to show you is a very big scaled up process. This would take, a decent amount of time. So really think about, what might work for your class, how you can scale it down and your students' needs. But I'm sure you've noticed this. I've noticed this over the years that students just do not know how to give very helpful feedback. And then they don't, on top of that, know how to deliver it in like a very motivating way. And they're also so anxious about sharing their work. So, we're going to teach it a lot more explicitly. And I started to weave everything a little more together. So depending on, whatever level you may or may not teach, I'm hoping that this is a process maybe you can at least find some breadcrumbs from, whatever, because I'm sure you do some of these yourselves. All right. So let me just talk about my approach. Here we go. So I really just I discovered that I was piecemealing the writing process, and that was not working for my students. And so I started to embed teaching feedback, teaching what this paragraph looks like and how it should be structured, along with let's look at exemplars, and then just breaking it down kind of like paragraph by paragraph. And then finally, they are ready for this feedback session once they have their draft. So here's a really quick overview that I'm going to breeze through, but I will be breaking this down for you. I have a lot of links to share, and I'll give us some time to ask some questions. But the quick overview, you probably do a lot of this, is, before discussing feedback, I want them to know the prompt, maybe even look at, maybe they have outlined ideas or evidence. But then what I do maybe a little differently is I try to establish a real world context or some kind of scenario. It's called process drama. So I try to take them out of the classroom and feel like they are not necessarily students who are really anxious about sharing writing. We'll talk about that in a moment. But then the basic training session, you look at the rubric, you look at, again, rubric with maybe like guiding questions, a rubric with alternative pieces to it. For example, my students, I found that a lot of students an A, like they have a lot of feelings about A's and B's and C's, or like a score of 5 or 4 means nothing to them. So, I try to break it down in terms of, my colleague actually developed this with her students. Expertise is a 5, confidence is a 4. So, in this beginning of the process, we really try to break down and interpret, what the rubrics mean. We look at exemplars, and then we finally start to score and then look at our scoring. Then I like to have us look at our feedback and talk about it. Are we giving very helpful feedback? What is helpful? What's not? What's motivating? And then we finally make it to that session. So let's break this down a little bit. So before I take them to this feedback training session, we've looked at the prompt. They're maybe gathering evidence. If your students are ready to do a full outline, like, do it. But I move the chairs. I don't know, this is my silly graphic I try to move the chairs in my room. I try to make it feel like it's not our normal kind of classroom day. And I try to put them into what's called like an orientation or training session. Let's talk about before that, though. So before they enter this training session, I try to bring in, once again, a real world scenario. This has really been helpful in my English classes in terms of getting students who are not normally bought in. So, for example, before we even start talking about feedback, I'll say, hey, this week you are no longer students in my classroom. You are now blah. And if you look on the right-hand side of this slide, you can see I have some examples. So like, you're now a first-year teacher in MCPS. You're teaching 9th grade English. Hey, we're going to go through a training session. And then, I might give them little name tags and they get to write their, Miss Foreman. Or you could have them do like, hey, your TikTok quick lit has like blown up and you really actually want to monetize. You want to create a newsletter on Substack, but you actually need to know how to change from this short media form to writing form. So now you need some training. You need to be able to critique your editors, right? Or maybe they were hired as a writing coach for the University of Maryland. Hello, $15 an hour. So just trying to make sure that like they know the stuff we're doing in here does actually, it can apply to things in your life. It's not just we're talking about an analysis paper. I don't know about you, but when I was in English in high school, I had a really hard time connecting what I was doing to any of that. So anyway, when I take you through this, I'm going to take you through whatever. We're going to go through this as if I told my kids they are 9th grade teachers in English. All right. So, and if you're interested in this, there's a whole, process drama is a genre of strategy that is used in many classes. Dorothy Heathcote is like the major proponent, but there's a local teacher, a local professor, Rosalind Flynn. Some of you might be familiar. She has a lot of resources on this type of stuff and other ways to embed like roles into your room. So anyway, we're going to go through the whole 9th grade teacher process. So I tried to write some of these slides and worksheets as if they were written for students in case you just want to steal them and not have to reinvent the wheel too much. So anyway, I might set the scene with them. I say, hey, welcome MCPS 9th grade teachers. You are now going to experience your first norming session, right? Maybe this is even an opportunity to teach them like what we do in the nitty gritty. They might like come to appreciate us, whatever, really dig into, wow, our English teachers are doing a lot. So, all right, so I go through this and then I tell them, well, here's what teachers do in a norming process. We look at the rubrics, right? We break them down. We then norm on our own. We write what's working well. We leave some feedback, and then we come together and talk about what we as a team want to look for and accomplish, and then how we want to give feedback. So, we talk about this. This is part of their training session, and then I break it down and they go through this process. So I put this whole process on this worksheet for you. So if you click through this slideshow, and I know some of you all just came in, so let me send the links again. All right, they're in the chat. So anyway, we just set the scene. Now we have our first warm up, right? So they go through the rubrics, they're breaking it down. They saw, it's expertise, confidence. Also, again, we're teaching students of all levels. So in my class, I may have students who might not understand what the phrase clear reasoning means, right? You got to break it down and say, remember, like, there's inductive, deductive reasoning. So, I try to really give as many resources, that some kids who may not need that can ignore it, but it's there for those who do. So they break this down, they reflect on the rubric, right? And then they come together and we're going to talk about it as a team, as you and I would as colleagues in a norming session. At this point, you could also give them student exemplars. I have never taught AP English, but I know that they have like a ton of scored examples on all levels. So that's perhaps useful even if you don't teach it. Or when I was doing like the style analysis with my ninth graders, we would look at a sample paragraph. We would look at it as a 5 and a 4, 3, 2, 1. My students who were still kind of getting used to the structure of a paragraph, I would have them break it down further. Like, hey, highlight the thesis and claim, highlight the evidence. Let's highlight this. And they would kind of really break it down. So those are just other things that you could add into that process. But these are also great resources just so that you don't have to make up a paragraph, because that is always time consuming. So that was just kind of their first dip in the pool as an individual. They come maybe together. We talk as a group about what we did, what we didn't do. And then I say, all right. So now let's do it again. Let's actually write some feedback now that we know the rubric. So depending on where your students are at in the writing process, I tend to use this to try and teach what an intro paragraph and a body paragraph looks like, So we'll maybe talk about, getting a hook in there. We'll look at and talk about claims again, and the structure of the body paragraph. And then they go ahead and leave a bunch of feedback based on our rubric. And that's just as an individual, as we would in our norming session. And then they come together and share. Maybe your students, though, aren't ready to attack a body paragraph there. Maybe they can only just handle, let's just do it with an intro paragraph. So anyway, maybe your students are ready for an entire thing at that point. But the point is, what I would do then at the end of this day, their homework would be then, okay, now let's go write your intro paragraph. You've looked at the rubric, you've looked at one, you're ready to at least get the structure and some breath there. So anyway, sorry, I feel like I'm sliding through this. So they leave a lot of feedback on here. And I can also give them examples of feedback I've left for my students, right? That's also maybe helpful for students who are still not feeling confident about leaving feedback. But once they do it individually, then they get into their PLC. I'll have them maybe do a gallery walk around the room, and they look at another set of introduction and body paragraphs that I printed, since that's what we're focusing on in terms of the writing. And then they, have a worksheet they put together, they talk about it, they break it down. So, and the idea is just, repetition is helpful, but just repetition in different ways, I guess, and breaking it down. Sorry, I don't know why okay. So yeah, now they're ready to write maybe their body and intro paragraph that day. All right, cool. So moving on, the next session, I don't know how time flows in your class. All of our schedules are so different, but the next session, I would really just break it down to body paragraphs. And for this portion, I'll give them, the whole class, 3 body paragraphs. Pick one. And they don't know this, but I give them like not so great body paragraphs because I want to really boost their confidence. I want them to go, oh, yeah, I can leave feedback. I know what's going on with this essay. I know what it needs. So I try to give them like not the best, so that it really helps to mold their confidence in leaving feedback. And since we have 3 paragraphs and about 30 kids in our class, you've got 10 different people on that document. So it really marks it up. And it's interesting to see, the difference in types of feedback students are leaving. Then after that, I like to have us talk about our feedback. At this point, I haven't spoken about what's helpful, what's not helpful. We're just leaving feedback because we've looked at the rubric. We can't so many things to focus on. So then we take a step back and I have my students open up these documents again, those 3 body paragraphs, and we talk about, so how are we giving feedback? What is a helpful way? What's maybe not so motivating? Let's break it down. We might talk about a time when like someone gave you feedback, and it doesn't even have to be on like school stuff. Maybe it was like your outfit, or maybe it was like whatever. We've all had this. So, if you wanted to break that down, you could. And I have this, again, this worksheet with that process for you. But essentially what they do is, let's look back at here, and then they go to this little worksheet. It's just a simple 2-column worksheet, feedback criteria. It's called feedback on our feedback. So it's kind of a lot of metacognition-ish here, but I just have them put in 1 column, paste some feedback, and then comment in bold about it. What is helpful about this? What's not so helpful? It's interesting to see what they point out, what they may miss. It's also interesting to see their feedback. Like, look at this. This is not helpful in the slightest, but they're also putting it in like, we need to improve our feedback column. So like we have a conversation about that, right? Language. Anyway, so that's, now listen, you're like, okay, this is going to take forever. I don't really want to have to break all this down. So one way to skip this longer process is maybe just give them a list of what is helpful feedback before you then enter into the body paragraphs. I found it was interesting to really talk about stuff, and students really kind of connected with talking about the way we give feedback. But again, time is of the essence always. So I have a worksheet that has this list for you that you can adapt, whatever. All right, sorry, I'm talking a lot, but we got some time, and we'll have time for questions and things to share. I know you all do wonderful things as well. So as you can see, I'm breaking it down, teaching the writing, we're teaching the feedback, and then they're going home those evenings, or I'm giving time in class the next day to focus on just that portion of the writing so that they do come in with some draft. I love to do a Pomodoro. I don't know if you all have loved the Pomodoro technique, but my students, I found my students are having trouble like really focusing for an extended period of time, like on writing. So what I've done is I've whatever, Pomodoro technique. You spend 25 minutes doing a task, then you take a 5-minute break. Then you do another 25 minutes, 5-minute break. So, but it's kind of fun because you call it the Pomodoro, and then you just, make silly jokes about tomatoes. And then it works. So I don't know, that was something that was helpful for me when I had them, move back and forth. Okay. Whew. So they've been trained. They have a draft, hopefully, and they're ready to do the actual peer feedback process. So I like to have students, I give students 2 partners. And obviously, you can put your groups together in any way, but really the biggest thing is I just want to make sure that everybody has at least someone giving them feedback, because, there's always a kid who may not have it, et cetera, et cetera. So at least they'll have one. But basically they're given 2 group members, they share their documents, and they get a choice: leave written feedback with, these comments with these stipulations, or I like to let them record some feedback. If they want to open Screencastify, scroll through their paper. I mean, that's what I did a lot through Zoom. And so I have a couple example videos that are there for you or them. But yeah, so they could maybe record the feedback, because it's kind of nice to have a conversation with someone about your writing. Sometimes we don't understand what people are saying in their writing, in their feedback. After they do that, they then have to fill out a rubric, or this feedback form. I basically take the rubric that we've been looking at, I break it down, and then they, at the end, leave a beautiful, helpful comment that is nice and supportive, but also picking out all the things we've been talking about. So they're going to do that ideally for 2 people. And then on, this worksheet, I, again, try to provide them with all the reminders of what we talked about when we're looking at the writing. Sometimes I'll break down that rubric again. Obviously, they talked about this earlier this week, but like they probably forgot a lot of the nitty gritty. So we try to bring it back, et cetera, et cetera. Ooh, Google Talk and Comment is also a good one. Oh, awesome. Because I've been trying to figure out, what are the most effective screen recording? Because Screencastify can have its benefits and not so much. It has a 5 minute limit, which is kind of good for me because it limits me to like my grading time. I'm like, all right, 5 minute cutoff, I'm done. Um, just a quick tip about that form to help you not have to do a lot of work. Make sure you set the settings to send responders a copy of their response so that they can then just forward their answer to their partner. Okay, so that is a really long, like they're doing a lot during that feedback conference. And I do that purposely because I really love spending time in conferencing with my students. I was lucky to teach like the ninth grade English curriculum that first semester, which is dedicated to writing. So I felt like I could put this time in, and it really did. I feel like save me some time in the end. I'm not a fan of grading at home, and I really have tried my best to design things so that I can minimize the time I'm spending at home. So this process has really helped me. So what I do is while they're doing that, and this might take a few days, whatever, depending on your schedule. Um, but basically, I do a think aloud conference with each student. So this is kind of like my script. I tell them, I say, we're going to do a think aloud conference. You or I are going to read your work out loud. And then at any point you or I need to say pause when we're noticing something, wondering something, whatever. This is a conversation about your writing because we want to set goals and we want to like develop your unique voice. Of course, whenever I say that, they're like, oh, no, no. So then I have to have the whole like cringe conversation. Like, no one likes hearing their work read out loud, definitely. But like, let me tell you, it saves you so much time and pain, like editing. I talk to them, you hear the grammatical errors, blah, blah, blah. But then I try to end it with like, but then you're going to hear when you sound really good. And so these are really cool conversations because to be honest, I do not go into these conferences looking at their essays because I don't have the time and I'm really not trying to do a lot of grading at home. So what I do is I will sit with them, I will read it with them, and I will tell them my thoughts out loud. And yes, it would take a little more time than I guess your average conference during school, but it's saving me the time after school. And honestly, I feel like when I left feedback comments, one, are they even looking at it? Two, are they actually understanding what I'm saying? I mean, I can see physically in their body if they are catching my drift or not. So anyway, so this I eventually convince them, they do it, and they're like, it works, and they realize the value in reading out loud. Um, and I don't know, I feel like we should. When we get to the secondary level, reading fluency is like apparently not in the curriculum. I don't know, but I think it's so important and building confidence. Anyway, and it's pretty cool when I do these conferences, students literally take the feedback right out of my mouth when they read their writing. They're like, oh my God, my sentences are boring. Or I've heard kids say like, I don't know what I'm saying here. So that's an opportunity for me to be like, yeah, let's talk about sentence variety. Or hey, let's talk about like maybe where we can get some more research. Cause yeah, this isn't very developed. I see that. So yeah, and metacognition, huge. Thinking about your
Hey, hey, so
hey there. Okay, sorry. More screen recorded feedback again for students who may maybe they didn't, they're not ready for that conference in class. They didn't have the writing ready. Maybe they're just really anxious about the fact that you would like to read their reading out loud, even if you're being quiet and like in the corner. So this is also an option, perhaps, or maybe you could have them record it and then you listen to it together. But anyways, just obviously some things to anticipate. These things tended to like I I used to get caught up in like, oh, what do I do? But I needed to let go. If kids have no time ready, fine, give them one peer. If students need more time, focus on the essay. That's what you need right now. You need to focus on the essay and talk to me. Grouping in threes helped. And then I finally was able to be like, okay, I'm teaching feedback. These kids do not need the right and exact same outcomes. Sometimes it's just helpful for kids to notice, wow, I'm pretty good at like teaching other people or helping other people. Or sometimes it's a lot of what I saw. Students would look at other students writing and instead of feeling down on themselves, they would go, whoa, I need to level up. Like wow. I probably could do that. So I was seeing a lot of that more so, which was really cool. So sorry, I sped through that, but I want to make sure I left some time for people to share, ask questions, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, are there any other strategies you use or questions or thoughts about this process? Blah, blah. And feel free to unmute or you can talk in the chat. Yeah. And then while you're thinking, I need to give you the participant survey before I forget. Oh, thank you. All right, here, let me, all right, so there's a participant survey if you want to fill that out. What happens with the kid who has not written anything to peer edit? Yeah, so honestly, so what I do with that kid is I let them keep writing, I'll spend time with them in conferencing. And then if they don't have anything written to peer edit, I'll still let them like look at another kid's paper and then I'll just count that as the grade for it. Because to me, it's just valuable that they were able to look and go through that process. And probably they would appreciate, I guess, just having me look at their writing too, because clearly they're really struggling, right, in some way, shape, or form. So that's kind of how I deal with that. Oh, so I create groups of 3 ahead of time. Yeah, so, to be honest, I've done it all ways, but yeah, ideally, I kinda like to have a little trio of maybe, like, a really, someone who's really ahead of the game, someone who's kinda in the middle, and just someone who might need that extra support or to see what's out there so they can level up. So yeah, that's kind of an ideal group, but I don't know, you may find maybe it's more beneficial to put students who are on kind of the same level in the same groups because maybe they're more comfortable. So I would say that really depends on your feel for, each class. Yeah. Um, cool. Yeah, and like please, I mean, feel free to reach out to me or look into process drama. That kind of stuff is fun. And yeah, I gave you a lot of links. So like dig through them, keep anything, adjust whatever you want, all for you. And then, hey, if you filled out that participant survey, you're good to go. You're ready for your lunch. Like, please feel free to zoom on out of here. So, thank you all so much for coming and spending time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.